Hello and welcome to the weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and founder of E equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, backgrounds, and functions. A team's job is to really deliver on business results. The role of the leader is to empower, inspire, and enable the people in the team to deliver those results. And there's a repeatable formula to drive that success: the E3 leadership code: express plus engage plus execute, powered by emotions. However, each leader's approach to applying this code is unique. And because there's really no one way to lead, it's about being authentic. And our live sessions really aim to showcase these diverse voices of leadership. And as we meet the leaders, we'll uncover what drives them, we'll explore their unique leadership style, their core values, and what's really shaped their approach. So let's make this as interactive as possible. We'd love to know who you are, where you're calling in from, and let us know if you have some big plans for the weekend, what you'll be doing. And please ask questions. We will be answering them as we go along. So I'm very excited to be welcoming Jamy Conrad, who's the VP of People and HR at Trust Radius. She is a stellar example of driving business success through a people-first strategy. Jamy's work is a testimony to how aligning HR initiatives with business objectives can yield remarkable results, really turning challenges into opportunities and significantly improving both employee satisfaction and operational efficiency. Her insightful contributions as a panelist in our recent webinar on leadership development and her active roles in Hacking HR, the Strategic HR Forum, and the Society for People Analytics shows her commitment to innovative HR practices. Jamy, I am so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us. And let me turn it over to you because I know there's a lot more in your journey and how you got here, and I think you would be the better person to share with our audience.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you today. Always appreciate the conversation that you bring out. The focus on leadership and professional development is such a critical topic for us, and I just appreciate having the opportunity to be a part of it. So I am Jamy Conrad, a VP of People and HR at Trust Radius, like Kathy mentioned. I have been in HR for almost 16 years now. Mostly in healthcare, was in healthcare HR for 13 years before transitioning to the tech space to work with the Trust Radius team specifically. So working in healthcare HR, I've seen the best and the worst of HR that you can imagine. And in tech, you see the best and the worst of HR that you can imagine in a completely different way, which has really been an exciting adventure for me. But my fuel for what I do and passion for what I do is, that alignment that you spoke of how can HR and people teams make the most impact in their organizations, and not forget that these are human beings that we're talking about, that they're not just workers, they're not just resources, but the human beings are there, and how do we approach this from a human-centric standpoint?
Yeah, because what I've learned of driving change for years, and that's what brought me into HR, right? Like you come in from the more traditional path, I think, and I came in from more of the business side, was how do you get stuff done? Well, you need everyone on board, right? And if you don't have the people on board, if we don't take care of them, then we struggle, right? It's a challenge.
For sure. Yeah, the starting of HR for me was I see a need and give me an opportunity to try it. That's how I started in HR. Somebody was gracious enough to go, "You really want that? Okay, go ahead and try it." And I've been passionate about it ever since. So
excellent. So how would you describe your leadership style, Janie? How do you show up, in the organization?
Well, I've traditionally find myself in leadership roles, ever since I was a kid. And it's no different now than it was then. I've always been leaned into the idea of servant leadership and how can I enable people around me And recently, I feel like I've shifted more into a transformational and vision leader, not just enabling the people around me, but also empowering them to have something to believe in, and to change maybe the way that they think about things and look at things and approach it from different perspectives. And so I've started to lean into more of that transformational leadership style. And that's kind of a recent change on my journey. There's whenever you feel yourself evolving as a person or as a professional, there's also going to be, reactions from the people around you. And so it's been really interesting to build that network of people that you can trust and rely on. Hey, I'm going through this leadership, development change right now, and would love to just have you follow along and give me feedback and tell me if I'm coming through in the way that I authentically want to come through, and not be afraid to be vulnerable with some of that with the people that you trust around you.
Yeah, that's great. Was it a conscious decision, Jamie, of you said, you know what, I need to really step up, as I'm evolving in my roles, I need to be more transformational in nature and inspirational?
Conscious decision, but there's usually a catalyst somewhere,
Mhm.
I knew that there was opportunity for improvement and evolution in my leadership style. And so spent some time with a couple of executive coaches and went through some 360 exercises, and took that feedback to heart. How can I make change? How can I lean into the strengths that I have to continue to develop in a way that I can make even more impact, or have even more influence, or be more effective in what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I love that. We were doing an exercise one time with a team, and it was around leadership style, right? Like understanding and picking. And one of the people had an aha moment, and they were like, oh, wait a minute, there's pros and cons of each type of leadership style.
Mhm.
And it was fun to hear. I'm like, well, yeah, but I guess not everyone realized that, right? So really going through that, it's interesting that the servant leadership is strong, but it really does take a lot more time, right? Of making sure you're
Mhm.
coaching the individuals, as opposed to a transformational. You tend to be able to put that vision out there and then allow people to run with it.
Mhm.
And there are pros and cons to each.
Mhm.
And if you're not careful, some people might look at it as micromanagement. Others will say that you're completely hands off, right? And you don't
Yeah.
care. Uh,
Yeah.
so,
And, and what does that feel like? How is that received? Especially if they know you in one leadership style and then see you acting in a different way, changes the dynamics of the relationship potentially. Um, But I think, speaking of the different types of leaderships, and, people may or may not realize there are all kinds of different leadership styles. I think that's one of the key parts about being an effective leader, is knowing what those leadership styles are, having them in your toolbox, and knowing the right time to pull the right one out so that you can be as effective as possible, whether it's with that person, where they're at in their journey, meeting them where they are, or whether it's through a situation or a crisis, or, there's a lot of different ways that you can lean into those different leadership styles. And I think that's part of what makes an effective leader, is understanding those leadership styles and then how to use them based off of the situation that you're in.
yeah, I agree. I mean, we talk about so often at equals Y is awareness, right? Like if I was to say one superpower that every leader should have, it's awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Being aware about yourself, being aware about others. And we did just put into the chat there, if anyone was curious what some of those are, we've got a document out there for the different leadership styles so that
Mm-hmm.
you can dig into them and understand. And I think your point is so spot on of really thinking about when they're appropriate. A company that's going through growth, you need to show up one way. A company that might
Mm-hmm.
be staying steady or going through a merger, it could be someone's excelling and someone's not. You need to have different
Right.
leadership styles.
Yeah.
What are some things you do within the organization of helping your leaders, right? Because you're focused on inspiring and enabling your leaders to show up and be better. What are some things that you look at to help them?
I look at their engagement survey results for their teams. We run manager effectiveness like reviews. So there's opportunity for them to get upward review from the people that are reporting to them. We look at, how often they're having their one-on-ones with their teammates, how effectively they're driving towards goals and the completion of and the success of those goals. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that at Trust Radius. Um, we look at all of them. I think it's important to have multiple ways to measure and different things that go into that, because leadership, humans are hard and leadership is hard. And, being especially in a mid-level role is super hard, because you're managing not just the people that report to you, but you're managing up as well. And so putting operations in place, or putting feedback loops in place that allow for that continuous growth and some of that conversation to happen organically rather than a forced function, is really important. And so that's some of the things that we've taken on in the last couple of years, as we've gone through some significant changes at Trust Radius.
And that's one of the things, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations over the last year. And one of the things I love is you really rely on data.
Very much so. Yeah. People analytics, I think, and I think what fuels that, honestly, is that, and it may resonate with some other people, other HR professionals, that for so long we've understood in HR that there are the right things to do and the right way to do it, and maybe the not so positive way to do it. And it's challenging, because for a lot of HR professionals, those are innate abilities, those are skills that we have, and it's hard for us to understand, well, why are you blind to the effect of what you're about to say? How do you not see 5 steps ahead of the reaction that you're about to get? But when you step out of that and understand that as a skill that you're bringing to the table, it can take some of that emotional aspect out of it. It's not just, this is the right thing to do. Well, how do you support that? How do you teach that? How do you enable that skill to be used outside of what you're bringing to the table, and help to make your other leaders more well-rounded and increase that awareness? And so when you can couple that with data and analytics, here's the right thing to do, and here's the analytics that help support that this was the right decision, then it makes it easier to have that conversation next time. You can walk in with, okay, you didn't listen to what I had to say, and here's the results of you making that decision. And let's try it again. Let's go through that again. Let's talk through that again. What can we do differently next time? And it can make it so it's easier to have a very objective conversation, which can, in a very sometimes heated emotional type of situation. So having that data really helps to take some of the emotion out of it and allow you to show up as a people person, an HR professional, an executive that can navigate that conversation without it being just the emotional response from yourself and the person that you're talking to or coaching or leading.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's so much goodness in that. And, you know, I sometimes go back to a conversation I had with one leader one time, and he's like, this person isn't meeting expectations. I'm like, okay, what are the expectations? Well, they're an accountant. They should know what their job is. I'm like, well, do they? And we went through it a little bit, and it goes back to the leadership code, where it's like expressing what are the expectations, right? Clearly
Mhm.
articulating, hey, this is what it should be done. And then I love how you bring the data into it and say, okay, well, this is what was supposed to happen. And we can see the result, and it didn't
Mhm.
show up the way we wanted to. And that objectivity, as you said, I think is so powerful, because I think everyone shows up differently. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of people, like, I'm pretty quick. I like, I run to the fire. I got a lot of red energy, right? So you tell me something, I'm going to get it probably pretty quickly. I don't need all the data behind it. But others, need the data.
Mhm.
That's the only way they're going to really be able to show up and really believe, if you will, on it.
Mhm.
So we've got a couple of questions coming in. One of them, you had talked about different data points. Do you have cultural surveys that you use in your business and looking at?
Not as much. I wouldn't. We don't run like a specific cultural survey, but what we do is we implement some of those same questions, or some we gather some of those same sentiments that you would get from a culture survey in our employee engagement survey. So trying to kill two birds with one stone with limited resources, but those culture questions can be highly impactful, especially if you've just rolled out new core values, or you've brought in a new leader, or some of those types of situations where there's been a cultural shift. Or my favorite way to use that data is when you're about to go through a major culture shift, when your business is going from one phase to another. Get that baseline and understand what's resonating and what's not, uh, before you get into that situation, right? Get your benchmarking in, so that gives you the most data to use as you're trying to figure out your strategy for communication, campaign and change management, etc. What skills do we need to develop in our management team? What kind of talking points do we need to give? Those questions in the cultural survey can really help you in your change management if your business is going into different phases.
I love it. And you talked about the baselining, and it's funny. Carrie actually on the chat has asked about that. Like, how do you baseline an organization or team? Is it's what it's first setting where you want to get to, right? And then deciding current state where you're at. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I'm not going to argue with Stephen Covey, right? You start with the end in mind and you build from there. So, what is the ideal? What are we trying to achieve? And then, okay, tell me what the reality is. Where are we at right now? If these are the 4 or 5 things that we're trying to achieve, or we want to have as part of our culture or our talking points or mantras, what are those 4 or 5 things? And then what's reality? And that helps you figure out where your gaps are, build your strategy around those gaps. It also tells you where you're hitting the mark, and you can lean into those strengths or those people, those leaders that are coming through loud and clear to help you navigate that. So that benchmarking and baseline is so important. When you think about, if you don't know where you're at, it's hard to strategize how to get where you're wanting to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I've often met with teams and they're like, oh, yeah. We're starting with where we are and we're going to figure out what we can incrementally do next. And, as you said, it's really about starting with the end in mind, because
Mhm.
I have a phrase, you think idealistically and not realistically, right? Because sometimes we just think, oh, what can we realistically do? And we miss so many opportunities.
Mhm.
And I think, we've talked about this, in the webinar we did, but just how to be scrappy is know where you want to get to, because you
Mhm.
probably find a couple of short paths to get there. That's going to be a lot quicker than trying to do what seems logical as the next step.
You can also figure out, like, there may be 2 or 3 things that can make a huge impact, right? When we think about that 80/20 rule,
Mm,
there's a couple of times, that I've experienced going through those situations where it wasn't hard, it wasn't a lot of work, it was 2 or 3 things that could change the entire dynamic of what we were talking about trying to accomplish. And so if I can focus on those 2 or 3 things, then I might be able to get 3 of my 5 ideals, like, within a very short window, and make a huge impact in a short amount of time. So there's a lot of pros to thinking about it and approaching it in that way.
yeah, and it goes back to you're thinking about the business objectives, right?
Right.
And really lining with where do we need to get to and how are we going to get there?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're starting thinking about, like, how, like, getting into the weeds a little bit around how is one of the things that I've always appreciated about my executive leadership team at Trust Radius is that they do prioritize the people aspect. We've carried company OKRs that are focused on people and team. And you don't see that a lot in organizations at the company level. You see that as your HR directive or maybe at the manager level for their effectiveness, but rarely do you see that at the company level. And I've really appreciated that about them. And we're going through a little bit of a transition right now where we think about it in a little bit different way. Whereas previously we were carrying an objective related specifically to people. And instead, we're transitioning to weaving in KRs that are people specific, that even more closely aligning to supporting the business objective. And it's a small nuance, but it's a huge transition in how we think about it, because that brings even more alignment between your people and your business initiatives when you can do that.
So if I can try to interpret, like, so let's say grow business by X%, then a key result might be we need to do more training, or we need
Right.
to,
Enablement of this program, or social media marketing from an employer branding standpoint, and bringing our employees into that, having their involvement be part of the solution for how we get where we're going.
Right. And I'm assuming that onus isn't on you. That onus is on all of the leaders.
It's on yes, it's an executive leadership.
Right. So what you may be doing is enabling everyone to have the tools or the training or whatever is needed, but you're not responsible to be the one that has to tell everyone that to be doing that.
Right. Yeah. And so it's aligned, and especially as an HR department of one, right? There, you can't do all of the things all of the time. And so having your management team, and especially if your executive team is bought in, having them be an extension of and bought into the impact that you're trying to drive from the people strategy. It's really rewarding to be in an environment like that. And we see it in our culture. Our employees are highly leaned in. We've gone through some tough times, and we are pulling through that knot hole. And we've got some great human beings that work at Trust Radius that are going to help us get there. So, really optimistic about the impact that the culture mindset and how our leadership allows for people over profit sometimes to impact that.
That's music to my ears, because I mean, me, I truly believe profitability is the result of taking care of your people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you look at the Leadership Profit Chain by Kevin Blanchard, it's if your people are engaged, then your customers are more engaged, and then they're going to buy more. And that's how the company actually achieves better profitability. I use the term the virtuous cycle, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about different initiatives or what's going on in a company, it gets very negative, right? Like, oh, well, we just had a layoff, or so and so left, or we can't invest in training. And then that has the negative, or you get into this vicious cycle. But as leaders, we need to put like the stick in the spoke, right? And say, okay, we have to stop this. And we need to find a way to put out that inspiration. This is the transformation you're talking about, right? That vision, that inspirational of, hey, here's where we're going. This is why we're doing it. And try to start that virtuous cycle to get everyone on board and looking through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Love that.
yeah, and a lovely comment coming in, Jamy, is that you have definitely built trust within your team, and congrats. So that's a real big kudos to you.
Thank you.
So for some of the leaders out there at different points in their careers and things like that, what are some things that have helped you? Like, have you had certain bosses that were absolutely fantastic that have given you guidance, or maybe someone that's been horrific, and don't name names? But, let's just
I'm in HR. I would never name names.
I don't know what I was thinking. What's some of the experiences that have really helped you, grow into who you are and how you show up as a leader?
Well, I was just talking with a mentee this morning about one of those situations in my career that it's kind of like the feather in the cap. I worked at an organization early on in my career where they were experiencing turnover in the leadership team. And when it was time for me to move on, I made the choice to relocate to Austin. We were making shifts in our personal lives that took me away from being able to work there in a manufacturing plant. And we had gone through multiple CEOs in the 7 years that I had been there. And he said to my boss at the time that me leaving was one of the most concerning things that he felt for the business over the next 12 months and recovering from that. So that was shared with me and made me feel like I was showing up. And I was young in my career. Another good example of that type of thing, I worked for an organization for about 10 years. And when I first started, it was a family-owned business. And the CEO said, if you want to learn HR, I will teach you everything you need to know. He was convinced he knew everything that there was to know about how to run an HR department. 9 years later, working with him, I was giving a presentation to our leadership team. And at the end of it, in front of the group, he said, when she first came into HR, I told her that I knew everything there was to know. And I'm proud to stand here and say today that she's taught me what HR really is. So that was another big win for me. So those are some of those things that fuel you along the way. From a leadership standpoint, the most impactful leadership experience I feel like I've ever had was I went to work for an organization that within such a short amount of time, I built a really strong relationship and a bond with the CEO at that organization. And we only worked together for, I think, maybe 90 days, maybe not even 90 days. And he has continued to be a mentor for me and a friend for me. And, when I go to him with my crazy ideas, he's like, that is not your style and that is not going to work for you. And at other times he'll send me something that, just really refills the bucket. And it was exciting for me to see how quickly, like, his leadership styles were so on point and the way that he approached situations were on point that we were able to build that connection from a very short amount of time. And he had built his organization and brought people in based off of the lives that he had touched and impacted. And so it was a great start to a culture. And unfortunately, we didn't get to work together very long. But I am forever grateful of that situation. And he gave me that confidence boost again to keep me going and then know that I've got a trusted resource that when I'm trying something new in my mind, that he's going to tell me the way I need to think about it from what he knows that is important to me.
Yeah, there's so much goodness in what you just shared. And it was the fact that they really thought about what you needed, right? I heard you say that a couple of times, and the fuel you needed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is so important as a leader. A pat on the back, an appreciation, little things like that can be huge motivators for people.
It
And
wasn't the bonus at the end of the year. It was all those things that we sometimes think about from a rewards standpoint. Wasn't any of those things. It was the relationships that we had built, the humility, the willingness to show humility, the willingness to share positive feedback or the impact that you're making. Those were the things that resonated for me, and I think that they resonate for humans in general.
yeah, I mean, I think we all want to show up more when someone treats us with that dignity and respect and that appreciation. You're like, okay, let's do it. And those are the managers and the leaders that I followed around in my career.
Yeah.
Right? That I still talk, pick up the phone and chat with them. And, did they do everything perfect? Probably not. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I know I can say, but none of us do, right? Like none of
No,
us are perfect.
no, human and perfection. It's a vision and an ideal, probably unachievable, and that's completely fine.
Yeah. And I heard you share like being authentic, right? Being yourself, being genuine, caring. We started the conversation before you and I even got on. You said, nope, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to be my authentic self. And I'm like, that's perfect. 'Cause that's exactly what shines through, right? When we try to fake something,
No.
people know, right? They can see
Yeah.
right through it. Uh,
Yeah. What you see is what you get with me. So,
and I'm the same way. People are sometimes, are you going to share that? I'm like, yeah, I just did.
yeah.
You get all of us. And
That's right.
but it's one of the things that we love to do here at Equals Y is helping people really look at understanding and having that awareness of what are your strengths, what are your values, what do you need, right? Like I think you now show up saying, listen, if you want the most out of me, if you can give me that appreciation or tell me
Mhm.
what's working, because I will do more of that.
Mhm.
And I think we own that to tell our managers what we need to succeed.
Yeah.
So excellent. Well, believe it or not, we are at the bottom of the hour.
Go so fast.
I know you and I could probably talk all day on this stuff. Um, for parting advice for our audience, what's a piece of advice you'd have for a new leader on, really how to show up in the workplace and how to succeed?
Well, I'll keep it as concise as I possibly can. I think that there's a lot of imposter syndrome and self doubt when people get into leadership roles. And so, the best piece of advice, if I could go back and tell myself, would be to don't doubt yourself. And when you are doubting yourself, go to those people that you trust. I talked myself out of a lot of things early on in my career that I wish I hadn't, looking back.
Mm.
And I think I stalled some of my own career on those decisions. And so, if I had a chance to give myself advice when I was, getting started in people leadership roles, is it's okay. You're going to make mistakes, but don't be your own blocker. Don't be your own worst enemy. Support yourself along the way.
Oh my God, that is so powerful. And I think I would like to have told my younger self that too. But also have the mentors around you, right? That can be the
Yes.
one that can be your advocates as well and help you through all of that.
Yeah.
Great advice, Jamie. I love it. And for anyone that is trying to understand what their strengths are, what their zone of genius is, we have an E3 leadership profile that you can learn more about. And also, we have some E3 leaders lunch and learns that are coming up in the month of February. One is for people that are looking potentially for a new career, but also just how to show up authentically, how to be more aware. And that one's going to be at the end of February. So we hope that you'll join us. Those are free and great opportunity. We're also doing a boot camp. So we have a lot going on in February, all really focused on how to show up as yourself, how to be authentic, how do you know yourself, and how to have the confidence. As Jamie says, don't let your own black box get in your own way. Have the confidence and go forward. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Um, and
Appreciate it.
and I challenge the group, think about what will you do differently today based on what was shared with Jamie today and what you might take away, and let us know. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.